Good afternoon, or good morning. I'm going to call this meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board to order. It's our March 18th meeting, and I appreciate you being here. And our first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic. I want to appreciate everybody being here this morning. We had a rail subcommittee meeting earlier in the day, and I appreciate y'all's involvement with that. Dr. Smoot, I asked him to lead those meetings as chair. And what we'll be doing over the next numbers of months in the rail subcommittee is to review, which we began today, review how we score and allocate funding requests, both for rail and for transit, and see if there's a way to improve on that scoring system, just like we did for Smart Scale, something that we should do on a somewhat regular, every so often basis, just to touch base and say, you know, what's changed, what do we need, what can we do better? And so the activity in that committee is going to be centered around that for the next few months, and maybe we'll find some opportunity to improve the system, and maybe we won't. But we're gonna take a good swack at it and see what we find. So I appreciate y'all being involved in that, and we will get a little bit more scheduled in terms of our work going forward in that regard. So the first item on the agenda this morning is the status of new IIJ funding programs excluded from the construction formula. Kim Pryor is joining us. Good morning, Kim. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here.
Sure. Following the discussion last month about the use of carbon funding, the Secretary suggested that maybe it might be a good idea to provide a briefing to you all on some of the new categories of funding included in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. Most of the federal funding in that authorization flows through our construction formula, but there are a few categories of funding that do not. And so I'm going to just provide you a brief overview of how we've been utilizing those funds. But I'm going to start with just a little bit of background first. I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about how the 6-year program is developed and how the IIJA is part of that. And then I'll go through the 4 new funding programs that don't flow through the construction formula. That is the Bridge Replacement and Rehabilitation Program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, the PROTECT Program that has a really long name, I'll let you read it, and the Carbon Reduction Program. By way of background, the 6-year program is a document that's developed and approved each year by the board by July 1st. It is required to be based on the most recent revenue forecast. There are several requirements associated with the 6-year program development in the Code of Virginia as well as the Appropriation Act. Mainly, we are required to maximize the use of federal funds. After all funds are set aside for required maintenance and other needs, all remaining federal and state funds are distributed to the through the construction formula and to the core programs that you're used to us talking about: State of Good Repair, Safety, Interstate, and the 2 Smart Scale programs. There are several special federal funding programs that have very restrictive requirements on how that can be used, and so those are excluded from distribution through the funding formula. Some of those include things like TAP, which you're familiar with, CMAQ money that you may be familiar with if you have an MPO in your district, as well as these 4 programs I'm speaking about today. You can't read this probably because it's really small, but it's meant to show you how complicated the funding formula is. And if you follow the formula through, you see how money comes out for the HMOF, then the Transportation Trust Fund provides funding to the various modes, And then there's funding that comes off the top in that center yellow box. And then that green box in the center shows you the federal funding that's left after all those things. And you can see that there are certain categories of funding that are called pre-formula that don't go through that distribution process to the 5 core funding programs.
Kim, if you go back for a second. Kim described this as complicated. If you saw what we had before that, it would be uber complicated, I think. So I assure you, it's a lot less complicated. And you will remember from the last numbers of meetings where I've talked about the concerns going forward that this and future boards will have to address. But really, the legislature will have to address it, and the governor will have to address it at some point. And that is, if you start at the top left where you see the two major splits, the orange being the maintenance and the yellow being the transportation trust fund, they're not 50-50, but they're 51-49. And so every regular dollar, not some of these other dollars, but the regular dollars that come in the top, after some exclusions for special structures and some stuff that comes off the top, they get split. And so that a lot of that money goes into those orange buckets. And the other half of that money goes into the yellow buckets. And of course, that all works its way through until the orange buckets are not able to fund what orange needs to do. And then we steal it out of yellow, meaning construction. That's what we call crossover in transportation. And as you know, we're continuing to battle that situation. The orange buckets also represent all the snow and the disaster stuff that we do. And so as those numbers go up, then the orange bucket numbers go up, if you will. And so we're struggling with keeping pace with inflationary increases in maintenance and then just all these weather events and situations that we've had. And so we will be coming back at some point, not too distant future, to look at the impacts of that and see what we need to do to adjust the orange to the yellow, if you will. Having said that, what I've talked about is not just that underlying issue of inflationary costs and spiraling maintenance costs, but also the fact that there's billions of dollars that in essence end up in the yellow buckets and never have any money that goes to the orange buckets. And that's all this regional money. So all the 81 money, all the HR TAC money, all the Northern Virginia regional money and the Richmond regional money all spins out into the yellow 100% pretty much, right? And they're not reflected on this chart. But at the end of the day, their maintenance has to come out of the orange. And there's no money coming in the top. We're just pounding billions and billions of dollars of sort of other yellow money, if you will, coming in from the regional entities. And that's making it worse. Now, just like building a new house or buying a new car, if you buy it new or you build it new, in theory, you're going to get some years of no problems. But then you're going to have to start maintenance, right? So we're not seeing the real impact of a lot of this yet, but it's coming. And Commissioner, I think just the operational costs of the new bridge tunnel adds about $40 million, $32 million of annual cost that's not, that is not anticipated in this formula, right? Because it all was the other yellow money with no orange money associated with it. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to address going forward. This is billions and billions. I think the 81 program is a $4 billion program. The Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel is $4 billion. The express lanes are another couple $1 billion with all the stuff that's going on in Richmond, all the stuff that's going on in Northern Virginia with their regional funds. All are going to have to get maintained and taken care of. And again, that's not hitting us today, but come back in 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years, and this is going to get really more serious because of that. So we're going to have to make some changes along the way and work with the legislature and whoever the governor is, so we'll have to figure that out going forward. But just remember that situation is there, it's real, and it's not going to go away. Is that accurate, Mr. Commissioner?
Fair assessment, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, Ms. Breyer.
You did a great job of explaining the construction formula without using a single acronym.
The yellow buckets and the orange buckets.
I'm going to use that. Just to familiarize those of you who are new to the board, to the 6-year program development process, it begins in the January timeframe. You probably remember Ms. Farmer giving you a presentation about sort of our assumptions based on the governor's budget and other things, the revenue forecast. That then becomes the basis of how we develop the draft 6-year program. We're deep in that work right now, developing the draft 6-year program. We'll be holding a series of public meetings in the April and May timeframe to present the draft to the public and other stakeholders. I believe you should be getting a schedule for those meetings today. Then after May, we will finalize the 6-year program, taking into account all of that feedback, and provide a draft 6-year program to you for adoption in June. As a reminder, once we adopt that program, it's almost outdated immediately because the program is living, and we constantly are adjusting funding on projects to help them advance. We're adding new projects in many cases. And so I bring to you monthly a monthly transfer report and a series of amendments when needed. So there's a resolution that accompanies the adoption of the 6-year program. It authorizes the commissioner or his designee, which is me, to the authority to make transfers under certain conditions, provided that they are consistent with board priorities, federal and state eligibility requirements, and according to certain thresholds laid out in the resolution. There's a similar delegation for the DRPT director as well. For transfers that are below that threshold, you're notified. It's all one report, but there's kind of 2 different components to it. You're notified of those transfers, and there's a section of that report that your approval is required for, and those are transfers that exceed that threshold. Your district engineers and district staff should be coming to you with all of those, whether they require your approval or your information. They should be briefing you on those monthly. So now transitioning to the IIJA and the federal funding, it was approved in November of 2021. It provides federal transportation funding for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. We assume that most of those programs continue beyond 2026 as part of our revenue assumptions that we base the 6-year financial plan and 6-year program on. So the 6-year window right now is FY 26 through 31. We assume those programs that are funded through the Transportation Trust Fund continue through 2031. There are several new funding programs that were identified in IIJA, as I mentioned earlier, and those are not distributed through the funding formula, and I'm going to talk to you about those in the following slides. The first program is the Bridge Rehab and Replacement Program. We get approximately $115 million per year for 5 years. This program is not funded out of the Transportation Trust Fund. It's a transfer from the general fund, and so it does not continue beyond FY 2025. So we only have 5 years of that funding. It is intended to provide for bridge rehabilitation and replacement. We presented the planned use of those funds to the board back in January of 2022 for your approval. The focus of our use of those funds is really on preservation type activities, slightly different from our State of Good Repair program. At this point, all of those funds have been allocated to projects based on that strategy that we presented to you all back in December and then approved in January. The National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, you all may have heard about this a little bit in the news recently. Again, this is another program funded out of the general fund, so it is discontinued after FY 26. We get approximately $22 million a year to support electric vehicle charging infrastructure installation. Some of the requirements associated with this funding program are that we develop an annual deployment plan to be approved by FHWA. Our most recent deployment plan was approved in 2024. The board to date has approved about 51 projects for use of these funds. And at this point, we have withdrawn those awards at this point because the Federal Highway Administration withdrew the guidance that provides the support for how we deploy those funds. And so once we get new guidance, we can reevaluate the program and potentially restart it. But at this point, we're really in a holding pattern because the approval of the deployment plans has been rescinded and put on hold. We did have one project that had a fully executed agreement with a fully executed federal agreement as well that did advance, but the others have been put on the shelf for now.
Ms. Sellers?
So has the money been sent to Virginia, or is it, the money's not there at all?
It's been apportioned to Virginia, and it's just sitting on a balance entry right now, pending further guidance from the administration and Federal Highways.
And is that going to hurt us in any way that it's sitting in an account, or?
I don't think we've gotten guidance from FHWA on that. I hope not.
Is this a reimbursement-based? Kim?
Yes, sir, it is.
So it's sitting in their balance entry for us, correct?
It's a waiting allocation. It's in a balance entry, waiting to be obligated and spent on a project in the future.
We haven't received any cash
Correct.
for those.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not going to be used against us. Sometimes just the federal government will say, hey, this is sitting there. So it's not going to look bad against us. Or it shouldn't
I
look
would
bad
say
against
we have
us.
not gotten any guidance to indicate that it would.
Okay, thank you.
I think it would be difficult to, I'm not going to pick the right words, but to plan for an expenditure, decide you're not going to plan for it and keep it in your bank account, and then tell the people that you were planning to give it to that it's on them that you did that. So, I'm not sure I understand how that scenario would occur, but we would certainly not think that was a good idea. Mr.
Secretary,
Lawson?
Just curious, does this or other federal programs trigger any or cause any state monies to be spent, or it's just purely federal money that we apply to projects?
These funds were deployed and required a local match or an applicant match. So there are no state funds that were tied up with these projects.
Anybody else on NEVI? Go back. Y'all are ahead of us.
Maybe.
We were still on NEVI. Anybody else on NEVI? Okay, so we're on hold. We've got one that's in process to be completed, and the rest are, the other 50 are on hold. All right, next.
The Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation, PROTECT program. We get about $39 million per year. That has some pretty significant restrictions on how it can be used. This is a program that is funded out of the Transportation Trust Fund, and so we do assume it continues beyond FY26. This funding is intended to cover the incremental cost of making infrastructure more resilient. So you can't fund 100% of the cost of a project in most cases. You have to fund just the cost that would be used to make it more resilient. It does require the development or encourages the development of a resilience improvement plan. Virginia did develop a plan, and it was approved in 2024. We did present the intended use of these funds to the Environmental Subcommittee back in May of 2023. We have programmed all of these funds at this point to projects through 2030 with very small balances from residual balances left on projects. To date, the use of those funds has been on existing bridges and culverts in our program, primarily through the State of Good Repair program. So we're able to identify structures and that are being developed to be resilient and cover the incremental cost of that with PROTECT. The last program I want to talk to you about is carbon, the carbon reduction program. We get about $35 million a year. It's distributed to the state in certain population categories. This is a funding program, again, that we assume continues beyond FY '26 because it's funded out of the trust fund. I show the percentage breakdown of how the money comes to us. 35% of it, 35% of the 35 million can be used anywhere in the state. 19% can only be used in rural areas, 2% in very small urban areas, 6% in small metropolitan planning areas. So those would be your small MPOs, not the regional large MPOs. 38% goes to those large metropolitan planning areas, Northern Virginia, Richmond, Hampton Roads, et cetera. The purpose of that funding is to reduce emissions or develop strategies that reduce carbon. We did develop a carbon reduction strategy, and it was approved by the Federal Highway Administration in 2024. I do want to point out that the money that goes to the large metropolitan areas is what we call sub-allocated. It's provided to those large MPOs. They pick those projects. They decide how that money is allocated and spent. The other categories are distributed by the state. In May of 2023, the board approved the use of the non-sub-allocated components of the carbon funding to a certain segment of projects. They were projects that were selected through Smart Scale, funded through the statewide high priority program, federally eligible, met the requirements for the carbon funding program, and that also had a pending budget shortfall that needed to be addressed so that the project could advance to its next milestone. To date, what we've discovered is that it can be challenging to identify projects that meet all of those criteria for us to fully utilize the funding that's specific to small metropolitan areas. So going back to the previous slide, that's 6% that goes to small metropolitan planning areas. Sometimes we have a little bit of difficulty finding the right project at the right time in the right place to use those funds. And so moving forward, we'll be expanding the use of carbon funds to projects that are funded with district grant funds, but that meet all of those other criteria, and we would be able to use the small metropolitan area carbon funding on those that qualify based on the criteria on this slide.
Pam, to be clear, go back,
Yes.
please. The direction is that we would, for the 6% of the funds that go to small metropolitan areas, that we would include district grant program projects to the high priority projects that could already be done there. Because we don't have enough, in essence, we don't have enough opportunity too often to find a high priority project that could use this money in those areas. And so we would expand it out to something, to district grant projects as well, not just high priority projects.
Yes, it helps us maximize the use of these federal funds that are very restricted. Yes.
Kelly?
Is it only for MPOs? Is it
Small ones.
Small MPOs, yes.
The big MPOs are sub-allocated. They get their
Right.
money, they make their own decisions.
So it would pretty much be what, Fredericksburg and maybe Lynchburg?
There's about a dozen, 11 to be specific. And it's very small amounts of money on an annual basis. So we use it to supplement the prioritized projects selected by the board through Smart Scale.
Are we going to try and make sure that it goes to those district grant projects serving those MPOs to make sure that it doesn't go to,
Could only be used for district grant projects in those MPOs.
Correct.
okay, so
They
we
would
are
have
going
to
to
serve those
protect it.
MPOs.
Okay,
All we're doing is saying, listen, for the small MPOs, that's all we're talking about. The small MPOs that aren't sub-allocated, where we make the decisions, we're having trouble spending the money because we don't have enough high-priority projects that are occurring, that are eligible for this money in those places. So instead of just saying in this MPO, you've got to be a high-priority project, it could be a district grant project in that MPO as well, could receive that money. So
So
we're
in
just
the lo-
expanding the eligibility from HPP to HPP by district grant. Still has to stay in that MPO,
Right.
It's just making it eligible for a different project in the MP,
Right, and
different
it's
project
still-
class in the MPO.
It still has to meet all those other criteria, eligible for carbon, federally eligible, selected through smart scale, you know.
Pending budget shortfall.
Pending budget shortfall that's preventing the advancement of the project.
So if you're in an MPO and you get some money that could go to you in a small MPO, but you never have a high priority project, you'll never get any money. What we're trying to do is loosen it up a little bit, because we're having a hard time putting the money where it needs to go. This way, we'll be able to do that. Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Questions on any of that? The next item on the agenda is item number 2, V-Trans Needs Identification and Prioritization. Jitendra Ramachandani from OIPI. Jitendra, nice to see you. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome.
Good morning, board members. I'm here to talk to you about how the V-Trans identifies transportation needs and prioritizes them. But while I'm doing that, I want to take a minute to talk about 2 other items that you have on the workshop agenda, and one item on the workshop agenda and 1 item on the meeting agenda. So in V-Trans, we have been talking about vision, goals, and objectives. Last time when I was in front of you, the board asked us to look at the performance measures. So Margie Ray from our office has been working with VDOT and DRPT on those, and she will be presenting next. So that's one item. That's the the left pillar to the left most. The second item, the action item that you have today with Mr. Tucker, related to the second column, he has met with several of you to discuss project pipeline studies, and he has a resolution to get those studies started. During his meetings with you, he may have mentioned that those studies are focusing on priority locations identified in V-Trans. So I'm here today to explain how those priorities are identified, and then also make sure that the way we identify priorities align with the way Smart Scale allocates funding, or area types and weights, to ensure consistency. So again, all the 3 items that you have today between workshop and meeting agenda are all interrelated.
Jitendra, if I can be redundant. So as you know, we've been working on measures for our objectives, right? And that's something we've been struggling with in some cases, to find the right measure. And so we'll have some more, as Jitendra said, we'll have some more on that today from Ms. Ray. But we also need to, what he's going to talk about today is midterm needs and priorities, and how we look at those and how we determine what those are and what our policies are. So we're doing this sort of in serial here, or excuse me, we're doing them at the same time. But Jitendra will talk about the second pillar here, midterm needs and priorities, and we'll revert when Margie comes back, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the measures. Thank you.
All right, so you may have seen this slide a few times, and so I will not belabor what is all written here, but generally, the code requires that the board identify transportation needs and priorities. We, as staff to the board, help establish those needs and priority locations based on the policies that the board have adopted. The code is very specific as to what it wants us to do and doesn't want us to do. So for example, the code doesn't want us to compile a list of needs from different regions, localities. It says that it has to be independent. And those needs and priorities need to be submitted to the governor and the General Assembly every 4 years. So the 4 pillars that you saw, one of the items that was listed at the bottom of the slide was the schedule for this year. So we are required to submit this plan, V-Trans, to the governor's office and the General Assembly by the end of this year. The previous plan was submitted in December of 2021. So to keep the 4-year cycle, we have to submit it by December of 2025. We have quite a few things between now and that time. And the idea was to present this policy without requiring or requesting any changes, except for the one where it is absolutely needed. So CTP meets these code requirements by establishing policies. So transportation needs in this context are referred to the needs that we think need to be addressed in an ideal situation over the next 10 years. Please keep in mind that when we are establishing the needs, we are not worrying about how much it would cost, what the solution might be. We are just identifying where the problems are. So in other words, it's an unconstrained sort of a need plan. The board established these policies to identify needs and priorities in 2021 and 2022, and they are included in what we refer to as the V-Trans Policy Guide. The map on the right of your screen shows roadway segments where there is at least one need present, so many of them have several needs present. When these transportation needs are identified, they are identified for 3 different travel markets. And travel markets are essentially trip purposes, and that is a requirement in the code. So for example, corridors of statewide significance, they are for interregional travel, to travel from Bristol to Lynchburg, to go from Fredericksburg to Northern Virginia. Regional networks are travel within its region. So for example, to go from Petersburg to Richmond, to go from Chesterfield to Richmond, Charlottesville to somewhere in Albemarle County. Urban development areas, so these are locally designated areas where travel occurs within those localized areas, downtown Fredericksburg, downtown Leesburg, and safety. So I will take a minute to explain these travel markets. I have already done that, and basically highlight what that entails. So corridors of statewide significance, these are the requirement that we identify needs is in the code, but the corridors are identified based on board policies. So the board policy has identified what you see in colorful lines on this map. And each corridor, I should say, includes rail lines, airports, and several other things. For these corridors, we identify 6 needs that are listed under the second bullet, the sub-bullet. So congestion, travel time reliability, rail on-time performance, capacity preservation, travel demand management, and safety. So that is just an example of all the need categories that exist within the interregional travel. Similarly, we have regional travel markets. As I mentioned, these are for travel within a region. This map shows all the regional networks that exist within the Commonwealth, and they are based on the Metropolitan Planning Organization boundaries. For these regional networks, we identify 7+ needs related to congestion, bike access, walk access, transit access, etc. Urban development areas are locally designated areas or locality things, and as part of their comprehensive improvement plan, they will designate these growth areas. They will say, we want to focus our growth in downtown Blacksburg, for example. They will designate that area within their comprehensive plan, and if they notify OIP, we will identify transportation needs for those. In 2021, the board also directed us to say that urban development areas are focusing on commercial, residential, mixed use, combination of commercial, storefronts and retail and residential. We need to also look at the needs in rural areas that might be related to economic development, so economic development sites. So at that time, we had looked at VEDP's Business Ready Site Program, and tried to incorporate that in this. So we identify needs for transportation needs associated with any VEDP Business Ready site that has a readiness tier of 3 or higher. And the needs for travel markets are listed on this slide as well. And finally, there is a sort of a market that was established based on the board policy, which is safety. So it's not in the code, but back in 2014, 2015 timeframe, board said we also need to identify safety. And these transportation needs, safety-related transportation needs, are identified on all publicly accessible roadways within the Commonwealth. So they do not have to be within a COSS, regional network, or urban development area. So they are for all publicly accessible roadways. We utilize data wherever possible. I think I would say it is a largely data-driven exercise. There are some qualitative aspects to determine these needs, and we make them available every 2 years before every round of smart scale on an interactive portal that is accessible publicly. The last set of needs were done in 2023. So that was an overview of how we identify needs. We thought it was important to talk about that before we focus on how we prioritize them. So the question is, well, we identify the needs, why are we prioritizing them, right? At the time when the board looked at the needs in 2021 and around that time, the board said, well, these are the transportation needs. These are the problem areas. Do we know what we need to do to fix a portion of Route 17 where you have found congestion need? And the answer is no, because we cannot identify solutions for everything for which we deem to be a problem. So board at that time said, why don't we prioritize them? And then we are going to focus our study dollars, states' study dollars, DRPT and VDOT's study dollars for capacity expansion related activities on what we deem to be higher priorities. So we identified priorities using categories, priority 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the board adopted a resolution saying we want VDOT and DRPT advanced activities to be focused on priority 1 and pipeline to be focused on priority 1 and 2. Chad Tucker has been working with you all on these pipeline studies, and those are based on this. And he has provided the context, so I will not get in the details of that. But while I say that, I want to make one thing clear, which is that a location does not have to be a priority 1 or 2 for it to be considered for smart scale. Any need is eligible for smart scale. So we are only focusing on where we are going to spend our study dollars. That's the only distinction between needs and priorities.
Does everybody understand that? So in essence, right, we looked at places, right, by code. We looked at regional networks, we looked at corridors of statewide significance, and we looked at urban development areas. And so those are places, right, in the state. And we said, okay, what needs do they have? But we also looked statewide and said, all right, not a place, but anywhere in the state, where is there a safety need? So as long as you fall in any of those categories, right, then you meet a VTrans need for smart scale eligibility. So the bottom 2 bullets have nothing to do with scoring of smart scale, have nothing to do with project selection, have nothing to do with anything of that. This is purely what we spend our time on at VDOT in terms of project pipeline studies and getting sort of VDOT work to look at these things. So if you're not a priority 1, that doesn't mean you couldn't have a scoring smart scale eligibility that scores and gets funded. It doesn't mean that. It's just directing us inside VDOT on where to go spend our resources. So we're spending them on the ones that have the most need, we think, and then we're going to try to do some pre-work, if you will, to help look at solutions and maybe inform the localities as well as us. So it's really not about, it's very, very important that we understand that distinction, that it's not about scoring here, it's just about directing VDOT, Chad and the team and others to what are we going to go look at, what are we going to sort of pre-development look at in terms of our resources. Everybody understand that? Tanner?
All right, so now now I will walk you through how we identify priorities. And keep in mind that, my goal here is to sort of highlight the major aspects that are policy related. There is a lot of technical work that goes in how we identify priorities. So we identify priorities using 4 steps. And the thought is to use 1 or 2 slides for each step to explain what we do. So the first step is to say, well, what type of priorities are we looking for? So are we talking about statewide priorities? Are we talking about the localities' priorities? So where the board ended in 2021 was to say, well, we will have 2 sets of priorities. One is for the entire state, irrespective of where you live. And the second one will be for each construction districts. There are 9 construction districts, and each construction district has own sets of priorities. So to establish statewide priorities, we use corridors of statewide significance. Again, the name sort of correlates to that. And for construction districts, we use regional network, safety, and select urban development area needs. What we get at the end is 1 set of priorities for the entire state. And then we get 9 sets of priorities for one for each construction district. So there will be priority 1 in Bristol district, priority 2 in Bristol, 3, 4. Similarly, the Northern Virginia will have sets of priorities. And each sort of priority is for different purpose. Statewide is you are being compared, a portion of I-81 in Bristol is being compared against 495 in Northern Virginia for statewide priority. But for construction district, 495 in Virginia is being compared against 395 in Virginia. So you're not competing against sort of a different area within the Commonwealth. So again, first step, we establish 2 sets of priorities. Then how do we prioritize, right? We looked at different need categories. So for example, how do we prioritize congestion? So we look at 2 factors, severity, how many people, how acute the problem is, how many crashes are there, how much congestion is there. And the second one is magnitude, how many people are being impacted. So we combine those 2 factors, and the reason is we want to provide benefits to as many residents, travelers as possible. So there might be a location that has a medium problem, but it is affecting a lot of people, as opposed to an acute problem that affects a small amount of people. So once we have identified these priorities, so you may end up in this type of situation. So you have 2 graphics on the screen here. The one to the left has a very high need for transit access. Red is very high, green is low. On the other location, you have a bunch of priority issues. You have a congestion problem that is medium. You have bicycle and pedestrian problem need. You have a safety issue. So the question is, how do we combine all these, right? How do we balance example 1 here with example 2? And we do that using the smart scale weights. At the time, the thought was that, well, localities are already providing input, so we want to use those similar weights so that we can compare these set of needs. And in 2024, as you may recall, the board changed some of the weighting systems in smart scale. So the reason we are here, one of the reasons we are here, is to ensure that this policy aligns with what the change that the board made in 2024. So next month, we will be coming to you requesting a resolution, requesting board action on aligning what we are doing, the weights that we are using, with those in smart scale.
So let me be clear here, because in my view, we should have just done this when we did smart scale. To me, this is sort of perfunctory. Basically, what we're saying is, as we changed our smart scale scoring, which we did a year ago, that we need to align the thing, the VTrans, weighting to align with the smart scale scoring, so that we're saying that we're identifying needs based on the same thing that we're judging them by on their scoring. And if we're not, then that doesn't make a lot of sense. So to me, these go hand in glove, and frankly, probably we should have just done that all at one time. Yeah, because if you're going to have a scoring system that looks at factors that are different than the eligibility to get in there, then you got a system that doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're coming back to do this now. I would suggest in future years, if we do, when a future board decides to change the smart scale weighting, that this should just follow right along perfunctorily, is how I view it. But we didn't do that, and so we need, as we're going through the V-Trans review here, we need them to be in alignment, or else we got one system looking at these things and another scoring system looking at those things, and we're not going to have a good result. Does that make sense? Everybody understand that? Okay, Jitender.
This slide shows what the weights were before, and the highlighted cells indicate what the weights will be if we are using the latest smart scale weighting system. So the green, if a cell is highlighted green, it means that the weighting has gone up a bit, and red indicates that it might have come down a bit. Again, it is aligned with the board action in
From last
February
year.
of last year.
So, yes, ma'am.
So this seems a little out of the calendar, though, if we're gonna change these weightings, because we did this further in the year the last time, if we're gonna do this at the next meeting.
No, this should have been done a year ago. As we're reviewing the whole, we've been reviewing V-Trans now for some time. And so all we're saying is that when we changed the smart scale scoring last year, and we spent over a year working on that, that to have an eligibility system that doesn't measure the same stuff the same way doesn't make any sense. And it's been like that. They were aligned before. They need to stay aligned. And so all this is doing is just aligning it to the decision that we already made with smart. Not sure, Ms. Sellers, if that answers your question, but this doesn't change. All this saying is V-Trans going forward, once we make these changes, we'll look at the projects in the same way that Smart Scale looks at the projects, so that both systems are aligned.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Sellers, another reason to do it now, we should have done, as Secretary said last year, when we made the smart scale weighting changes. But the reason it becomes important now is because a pipeline program that is getting ready to start new studies, we want to make sure those studies are based on priorities that are using this updated weighting system. And that's what the intent is, because the pipeline studies that start now will feed the upcoming cycle of smart scale that will be using these weights. So we are just trying to ensure that pipeline studies do not end up focusing on things that are no longer priority one based on the new weighting system.
This will guide our studies, right? This is what this is all about. This guides our studies. And if we're using criteria to guide our studies that are supposed to inform projects going forward, and they use different scoring or different weighting than the system that scores them, then you're going to be creating things that aren't going to score or going to score better or worse than you think they should, because you're using different systems, which makes no sense.
Right, so, but last time, there was a period of time where a survey was sent out or something to the users of the system or the users of the Smart Scale database, and they had an opportunity to say their thoughts and how things worked. Are we not doing that this time? Are we
We
not?
did that with Smart Scale. To me, this is
So-
administrative more than it's anything else. That's what we did with Smart Scale. We got all that information, we hashed through it for a year, we decided to change the formulas to see what you see in the recommended category here. It's already done for Smart Scale. So if we don't do it for this, then we're going to send our teams off to study projects that are going to give you different results than when they score through Smart Scale, because we're going to send you in a different direction than Smart Scale's sending you, and that doesn't make sense. So this is just informing us internally to go look at the same things that we're going to judge them on when we score them. As I said, to me, it's more of an administrative matter. These things should be exactly the same every time. These numbers in our V-Trans project pipelines should be exactly the same as the numbers in Smart Scale, and they always have been. We just didn't do it simultaneously, so we're coming back to do that. Sellers, I think you're deeper than you need to be.
It's just, I remember the last time we did this and we were here talking about it and it got a little heated going into it. And I would
Not
like
with
to
us.
avoid that.
Not with us.
And Smart Scale is just, it's a very emotional topic.
We're not changing Smart Scale here. We're
well-
aligning our project studies with the new Smart Scale scoring. That's what we're doing.
So maybe I'm not understanding what this is telling us. I'm not understanding what we're
So,
looking at
so let me
here.
back you up. So when we had the previous slide that says, well, Smart Scale application, this is slide 11. Go to slide 11, please. While any Smart Scale application that meets a need is screened in, the V-Trans priorities allow the state to help identify solutions for higher priority locations. Okay? So we've decided the new Smart Scale scores. That's done. And it's been implemented. Now we're saying, okay, what directs the project pipeline studies and the other studies, the V-Trans, or the other studies that we do in those departments at VDOT, how do we determine what we go study in order to get it ready for a solution that either we or a locality might want to introduce? So we're going out, we're saying, okay, we saw a need. All right, let's look at it to find out some solutions. Let's get our team to conjure on some solutions that then we and/or localities can use to implement in a Smart Scale application that would solve that problem. So all this whole thing we're talking about is just directing internal VDOT people to go use the same numbers, the same algorithm, the same weightings that Smart Scale is going to judge them on, right? And that's all it's doing. It really has nothing to do outside of VDOT per se. It's just directing our VDOT staff to use the Smart Scale numbers, because we've changed the V-Trans numbers to reflect the Smart Scale numbers like they always have reflected. And then they will go look and establish those studies that would be, that would address the same thing that Smart Scale will look to score.
I'll need a,
Everybody else sort of, any other questions on that? Okay, we'll work offline, Ms. Sellers.
All right.
All right, so we're back to slide 17.
Right. So this slide.
So next time, Jitender, whenever that is, I won't be here. Perhaps you will. Perhaps others will. Next time Smart Scale gets amended or changed. Remember that this should go right with it, right? And we'll be done with it. Otherwise, you've got one group going out planning and doing studies based on priorities that aren't going to be the same priorities that the system that's going to judge it as to whether it's a good project or not uses. So we'll go off and study things based on one criteria, and then we'll come back with a project that may not line up because the criteria of the scoring is different than the criteria of the planning, and that just doesn't make any sense. So it should have just been done administratively at the time, in my view, but we didn't do it, and we've done it this way before, so I felt that we needed to bring it back and let the board understand that and make their vote. Okay. Next slide.
So one final thing, so as I mentioned, we establish priorities in 4 steps. The last step is we look at the needs and priorities. We say, oh, is there anything else going on? Do we need to look at the payment? Do we, is there a payment need, bridge rehabilitation need? Is there a flood issue? So those things are adjusted, scores are adjusted based on these 4 factors that are listed on the slide. We try to make sure that we are focusing on relevant items so that, for example, flooding can worsen a safety issue that might already be present or a congestion issue that might be already present. So we adjust that, and at the end, what we get is, again, 2 sets of priorities. So what this is, this map is showing statewide transportation priorities that are focused on COSS, corridors of statewide significance. So if there is no corridor of statewide significance, that will not have a statewide priority location on it. I see Dr. Smoot is trying to see where the colors, what those colors might be. So the red is priority 1, orange priority 2, yellow priority 3, and green priority 4. You see a lot more green and very little red, which is in the Northern Virginia and Fredericksburg construction districts. So I-95 between Fredericksburg, essentially, and Northern Virginia is all red, is all priority 1. Hampton Road Bridge Tunnel, which you may not be able to see very clearly, is priority 1. And there are other sort of places where there is priority 1.
What your tender's trying to tell you is, in a general way, this reflects it, but some of the specific small reds you can't see in this map. So there could be some other places, and we sort of struggle with whether to give you the map or not, because it's hard to see the detail in it. But this is the best we could do. Mr. Lawson?
Is there a way for us to access that so we can zoom in and try to identify,
Sure,
see if we agree?
sure.
Thank you.
The construction district priorities are shown on this, and on this map, we are only showing priorities 1 and 2. So these are for each construction district, you have 9, you have 1 set, right? So you will see red in every construction district, whereas for statewide priority locations, you may not see red in every construction district. You may only see in 2, 3. So here, for every construction district, you have red and orange colors, that are priorities 1 and 2. And these are essentially the basis for the pipeline program and VDOT's advanced activities and other things. So this map is available on the web, and it would be best viewed on that. I can share the link with the board members. I will say, though, that it's very similar to smart scale, right?
Well, let me bring you back to something.
Yeah.
Don't get wrapped around the axle on this, folks. This is not allocating construction dollars. That's not what this is doing. It has nothing to do with allocating construction dollars. It has to do with what we're going to go study, because it's the most important, highest priority place to study, and we have limited resources. And that study may or may not result in an application. It may or may not result in an application that's successful. It's just what we're going to go study at VDOT, because it jumps off the page at us as a priority location, whether it's a statewide priority location or whether it's a construction district priority location. That's all it's going to do. It's not going to send up one dime of construction money anywhere. It's just going to be planning and pipeline project money. And it will inform the people who work in that arena to go look at these places to start looking at solutions. And again, that could sit on a shelf. That could be, it could be something that was never funded. Shouldn't be if our process works right. But it's not tied in any way to construction funding. It is aligned with it, is what we're trying to do, so that we study the things based on the same criteria that we're going to award money on. That's what we're trying to do here. So again, it's just directing the VDOT people what to go look at based on how we've changed our scoring and what our priorities are across the Commonwealth. That's all it does. Does not have one construction dollar associated with it. Mr. Lawson.
Mr. Secretary, is there a budget item for this study? How much
Yeah,
money do
we've
we
got-
spend
we've
on
got-
that?
How much we spent on that arena? Chad? $6 million per year is what we're talking about. Yes, sir. Dr. Smoot? Your mic's not on. Working? Cut you off, Mr. Dr. Smoot. I told him to do that. It was only gonna work, it was only gonna work when I hit the button, though. Yeah, I was supposed to hit the button. Here we go. Here we go, Dr. Smoot.
To the level of, thank you. Can't drill down to the level of detail here, but we already have a study, I think, in progress on Route 460 in Giles County where the mountain is moving. There's some kind of study going on over there.
Mountain's moving on 460. Did you know about that?
Where we have actually had to close one of the lanes for about 4 miles, and it's now been closed for a year or more.
I don't know if that's a pipeline study or what that is. How many studies we do in a year, Chad?
Is this in regards to?
Yeah.
Hold on, guys.
Completely different.
Well, what does this matter then?
It matters to the studies that are being done.
So,
It's just a different kind of study.
Dr. Smoot, you're referring to the evaluation of what we're going to do as a result of a landslide that occurred along 460.
And moving subsurface, yes.
Exactly. So that, we already have a roadway there. We're figuring out how to be able to maintain that traffic and what are we going to do to an existing facility. All of V-Trans is looking at
construction.
the needs that are experienced from the criteria that Jitender presented for new roadways, new transit facilities, new multimodal facilities, and are not indicative of things that would be related to a maintenance activity or an emergency closure that you're referring to. These are
Remember-
all new needs.
New needs, okay, thank
If you
you.
go back to slide 5, the needs do not include maintenance and state of good repair needs. This is about a place that isn't operating right because of one of those criteria that is outlined in the previous slides. And it's not working right, and we need to look at how do we fix that. And so we're trying to inform a $6 million, we're spending a lot of time here, but it's important. We're trying to inform, at least partially, inform a $6 million program that will go out and look at different need areas in the state that this identifies. And we'll try to form some solutions, some potential solutions that then can be socialized and or implemented as we chase a smart scale project. That's all this does. And all we're saying is it needs to be in alignment with the system that it's going to get scored on. Because otherwise, we're going to be studying stuff that is not going to score well, or we're not going to study something that is going to score well, and we shouldn't do that, right? That's all this is doing. So Dr. Smoot, this is not about what you're talking about. this is about a corridor of statewide significance that is overburdened or has huge safety problems or. But fixing stuff that's there because of a problem is not part of these kinds of studies. Okay?
Right.
Anybody else?
All right, so as I mentioned, I think the purpose here was to give you an overview of how we identified priorities, given that Mr. Tucker will be starting studies and has a resolution in front of you later in the day to for studies that are based on the maps that you saw. I will say, though, it's not only limited to pipeline program. As you said, it's the previous board, the board policy is, includes VDOT and ERPT's advanced activities and other efforts as well. So right now, the changes that you saw, the green and red percentage changes that you saw to ensure that priorities are using the latest smart scale weighting system. We plan on ensuring that they are aligned and they are enshrined in the board policy, in the prioritization policy. So we will be here back. We will be here again in April requesting board action to do just that. With that, Mr. Secretary, I'm available if there are any other questions.
Ms. Lawson?
I apologize, I'm not sure I understood what you just said. We're going to vote today on an action item on what Mr. Tucker is going to study? Or this is for something that's coming up subsequently at a later monthly meeting?
This particular item, request for action on this particular item, it will be in April, next month.
Now, I apologize, Mr.
No,
Secretary.
no, I'm hearing you. I know where you're going.
So,
Ronika's coming up.
thank you.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Lawson, just to clarify, this afternoon, what you'll see in front of you is an action, request for action on the studies that are project pipeline studies that Chad has been out to talk to each of you about. What Jitender's referring to is action next month on the changes in the weightings.
Okay.
Okay, so you already have that in your packet. It's attachment A in the resolution. It outlines all of the studies in each of your districts. Hopefully that clarifies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. All right, Jitender, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the V-Trans performance measures. Ms. Margie Ray. Welcome. Nice to see you. Hope you're well.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I had a little surgery on my hand, so if it seems like I'm flipping you off, it's purely unintentional. So anyway, thank you. I know
Thank you,
we've had
Ms.
this
Thank you for
purely
clarifying.
unintentional.
We appreciate that.
So this is a topic that's come up several times before. Jitender referred to it in the beginning of his presentation. And so today, we'll finally get to see all the performance measures, some of which you all have seen versions of in the past. And this is kind of our final proposed list for your consideration. So this is just kind of what I'll go through the slides. There are quite a few slides, so this will be lots of fun. One thing, though, I think that context and understanding how all these things connect, clearly when we talk just, listening to Jitender, that sometimes making these connections is difficult because there's so many different pieces of information. So we do have this transportation investment cycle way to view things. And so what Jitender's talking about is the top of the circle there. With planning, we have all these other plans besides just our long-range plan. From that, we get pipeline studies, we get other places that we identify potential projects, and we develop potential solutions that then go through different prioritization processes such that we are now investing in some of those solutions. And then the last one there that I'm going to talk about today is how we manage this and look at the performance so that we understand if things are working or not. We do have code that supports the development of measures and targets through both our office being directed to develop these things for your consideration, but also that through V-Trans, even in the long-range plan development, that we're identifying measures and goals, We do also have federal requirements where we have to establish targets, and I'll mention some of those today. You all have a role in adopting those targets based on the Code of Virginia. As we've had a lot of discussion about performance measures over the years, but we've never really adopted anything except for those specific things with some of the programs I'll mention as we go through. So we really do want to have that holistic approach, as you all have identified as well, where we have a set of measures that we can use to assess our progress against those vision and goals. We've worked very closely with VDOT, DRPT, and VPRA to develop these objectives and measures. And I am not the subject matter expert in all these areas, so we have people in the room that will help support wherever there might be questions that I'm unable to answer. So just a quick reminder of what our goals are. We focus a lot on safety. We look at system preservation and our assets. We want to make sure that we're maintaining our economic competitiveness, and that comes through moving our peoples and goods. Integration or interconnected systems. We want to integrate our modes so that they work more efficiently. And environmental stewardship is always very important to us. So now I'm going to begin going through measure by measure. But as I go through, I want to lay out the framework here. So obviously at the top of the page, we reference to the goal. The objective is in the left column. And then for each objective, there may be multiple measures, and those are highlighted in the right-hand column. This template is consistent throughout this presentation of going through A through G. So we focus on the requirements. Is it a federal or state requirement? If it's federal, obviously we'll say that. State is where you all may have already adopted a target. Then we've got state up there also in some cases where we're proposing the targets such that it would become a state requirement. There is the description, what is it we're measuring, a little bit of how we might be measuring that, data sources that we use. What is our desired trend? Some of these measures are new, so we don't have a lot of historical data, but we know what direction we want to go. Have you set a target yet? What's the basis of the target for item E? F is what is our current performance, most recent performance? And then finally, G is focused on what is the current target that's being proposed or has actually already been approved. Also with the organization, generally within each goal area, focusing first on the highway measures and then on the public transportation measures. So with the next three, they are all focused.
Margie, can we back up a second?
Yes, sir.
So explain how these measures, so we're recommending these measurements, which we haven't had before. How do we actually use this information?
So
What does this actually do? That's what I want to understand.
I should have said the linkages, I think, are very important. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. First, in many cases, we already have to develop certain plans. So here you can see reference the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And in that plan, it's updated every 4 years. It's trying to help set the stage for where we want to improve things. So measuring these things also help provide some feedback into, are we making progress against these other plans and actions that we're trying to take? In some cases here, for the safety measures, the board has adopted a policy on your investment strategy and how we want to invest those dollars to help improve our safety outcomes. So we're hopefully tying these things back into board policy, and if policy doesn't exist, certainly that conversation of do we need something that helps encourage and support this. We want to make sure that the investments that we're making are all data-driven to inform decisions, and that hopefully as we're investing in safety as the example here, we're starting to drive down our fatalities and serious injuries and getting the outcomes that we desire.
Here's what I'm asking, because otherwise we're let's pretend, let's pick one, that we set a target, a performance target on one of these safety measures or any of your measures, and we don't meet it, we meet it, or we exceed it. What happens?
There would be an analysis to understand what those outcomes are.
But does it drive a construction dollar? Is it linked directly to a construction dollar? Is it linked directly to a maintenance dollar? Is it linked directly to doing anything, any expenditure? Or is it informative in its nature so that we can understand how we're performing given our goals and objectives.
The latter, very
Right.
much that it's, so it is not influencing the dollars directly. It would
So
be
what I want people
informing.
to understand is these are measures that we're judging ourselves and do our programs and our policies, are they advancing us to get these results or not? So for example, we set a number, and I hate this because we can't figure out the right word to use because there's not a good one, a target, a goal. I try to use a forecast because I don't like to target or goal a fatality. But we set a number that we think that we can get to, right? And then we either get to it or we don't. And if we don't get to it, it doesn't trigger something that is some expenditure. If we do get to it, it doesn't trigger something that's some expenditure. It merely tells us that we haven't gotten to that goal, right? And maybe we should look at other avenues that we could take that would help get us to that goal. But it doesn't create any action per se. And so what I want to make clear to y'all as we go through these, because there's lots of them, is if it's not exactly the right thing, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because I don't know what the perfect is. And if we have something we can do better, we want to do it better, but it's not going to tie itself to a dollar that's going into a district or into a program or into a project. It's merely informing us in a big picture way as to how we are progressing towards those bigger picture things that we want to get done. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
So as we move through some of these measurements, which are important, but understand it's not going to drive a dollar of a sidewalk, a bus, a highway, a tunnel, a maintenance dollar. It's not going to do anything. It's merely going to come back and tell us that we're not doing so well in this area relative to our performance target. And that would say, okay, well, maybe we need different strategies, or maybe we need a different program, or maybe our target was incorrectly set and we got clarity on that. But what I want you to understand is when you look at these things, and as we approve them later, that it's not driving a dollar here, directly or per se. Does that make sense? Is that clear to everybody? So it's just a way of grading ourselves and our progress, which will help inform us as to we should be doing something differently. And that's when we then get into what might be, and what does that look like, and is the board going to approve that or not? How much money would go to that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just, it's informational, Ms. Norton. Is it working? I don't think it's working. Is it green? We're cutting everybody else off from that side. That's part of the state that nobody gets to talk. If you're on the 81 corridor, you're out. Lawson's been talking. Can we see what's going on here? We talked very nice about you at the concrete conference earlier in the week now, and you know. We gave you all sorts of kudos. There we go. I think Dr. Smoot's been monkeying with equipment. That's what I think.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, so as I understand what you're saying is this is much broader than road construction. We're not looking at, or we are looking at if the construction of the road had an impact on safety, but we're also looking at much broader things because there are many other elements of transportation that need to be considered by this department. Is that correct?
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, like look, on slide 8, for example, I just picked that one. It says the objective is to reduce the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries through this implementation of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So we have a plan that's approved. We now are measuring the elements that would have been addressed by that plan. And we're going to say that our target was either reached or not reached at the end of the year. And if it was reached, then you might say, okay, well, it seems like the plan that we have is working, right? That would be where you would be led. If we're not even getting close, we're going to say, well, something's wrong here. Our safety plan isn't giving us the desired results. Maybe we should go back and look at the safety plan and see what we could do to fix the safety plan or amend the safety plan to get better results. Or maybe we just misjudge and the results were unrealistic. And so that's all this is doing, right? This isn't sending dollars somewhere. It's not approving a project. It's not doing any of that. It's merely informing us as to how we're doing based on the goals that we have set. And that then that helps inform us as to where we may want to go look and/or determine whether we want to spend some resources. But that's a process that we would go through. Does that make sense? Mr. Lawson?
I remember this well last year, and I was just reminded, we had to do this because it was a federal requirement. Is there any measurement of how we match up with the other 50 states?
Oh, sure.
Is it tracked?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they've all done the same? They've
Well,
submitted
they have
an estimate?
requirements. I mean, if this is part of the federal requirement, they'd have the same requirement.
Okay.
We'd have that data, yes, sir. And that would help inform our target, right, in theory, somewhat. So, yes, sir. Some of them would be and some of them might not be.
Although it's a self-imposed target, you don't know what a sister state did or how they came up with their number and therefore how they matched or didn't with it.
Sometimes you do, yeah, you do. Yep. Okay, Mr. Coleman.
I know that we've been going over this a lot, and I know that you have mentioned on numerous occasions your desire to see fatalities and serious injuries reduced. But as we've gone through this on multiple months, I've become to realize that much of what is going to reduce those numbers maybe involves another secretary or another area in the state. Is there any discussion or collaboration being done with other secretaries within the Commonwealth to help achieve these goals?
Well, there's, there really, answer is yes. The top of mind, the organization that we're most involved with that's not part of my secretariat is public safety. So yes, the answer is yes. Between DMV and VDOT and public safety, we do a lot of talking. We work on legislation, we work on these numbers, safety numbers, there's a lot of interaction, yes. But just a way to say we set a target, how we doing? If we're doing well, then maybe we think it's okay. If we're not doing well, we got something to go look at and figure out why we're not doing well. So my point is, whether it's 819 or some other number, it does not drive any action. And so this isn't particularly a good target, but if you go to another one, meet long-term sustainable pavement and bridge performance targets adopted by the board. Well, we get a report on that, right? And we have a target of X, and we get a report and it tells us what we did. And if we didn't get X, nothing happens unless we decide something happens. And if we got X, nothing happens unless we decide something happens. It's just a report card. That's all it is. And so if don't have, if you think the number should be 820 and I think it should be 815 and somebody else thinks it should be 910, folks, it's not going to drive a dollar of money directly. So just understand that. And so what we've tried to do is hone in on a specific measurement that would be reflective of what we are trying to get to. And this is our report card system. This comes back and says, this is how you're doing. And then we decide whether we want to take action based on the report card. Do we want to go to study hall? You know, do we want to get extra tutoring? What is it we want, right? But this is just the report card. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so now getting into some more specifics, a little background with these three measures, as we've already highlighted and everybody recalls, this is a federal requirement. You have to set targets annually. So I will be back in front of you in May, probably with the next set of proposed targets for calendar year '26. But with that said, this is something that you do all see regularly. We do report it. A couple quick answers to things. There is a federal dashboard where all states have their data reported on these federal measures, so that there is definitely, at the federal level, tracking of how all the states are doing. And we use that information sometimes ourselves to talk to our peer states about what they might be doing, that we can either learn from or share what we're doing as well. So first one, these first three is focusing on fatalities, serious injuries, and our non-motorized injuries and fatalities. So they're very similar from the perspective that it's all part of the same action item that you all will take later this year and that you took last year. So, it is, part of that description tells us where this applies. So it is all public roads. This is an aggregate on an annual basis of what's happening. So it's not tagged to a specific project or investment. Again, as the commission, as this has been stated, is that this really helps us track where we're going. Any more questions then on fatalities? The serious injuries are also what was adopted by the board last year and will be brought back to you again this year. And the last highway one is related to the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, our bike ped measures.
And I'll just say, because I have to do so, the bike get worse. I've said it a million times, I'm gonna say it 1,000,001. As we push more money and there's more demand for bike ped interaction with vehicles, until we get until we get the right system, which I would suggest we don't have yet in terms of what kind of infrastructure we actually create, and until we get bicyclists and pedestrians and motorists to all understand what the rules are and how it's supposed to work, and until we get sort of a continuous enforcement so that there's that piece, Mr. Coleman, we're going to continue to see problems because we're just pushing more people into that same space in a different way. I mean, I'm dealing with the Amish buggies in parts of Virginia that are a serious issue, right? And how do they have to operate? A horse and buggy on a road is not something most motorists are used to encountering, right? This is not 1930. We're not used to that. And so how do we make sure, as we've had these folks in Virginia that are using this mode of travel, how do we make sure they're safe and that everybody else is safe? So there's, you know, when you have a post-mounted tubular delineator, which is your safety device for the ped, for the ped or the bike, that's at least something, right? It's better than a line on the road, I think, but it's not going to stop anybody, right? And so this is something we're going to grapple with for the next 5, 10, 15 years across America as we're pushing more of this into to that roadway. So, if you'll continue. Margie.
Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Ms. Norton. Sometimes. Sometimes. Sometimes but it's not as clear as you'd like it to be. And I'll give you an example that doesn't deal with the external elements, but if you're drunk driving and you're distracted, what goes on the report? You know, and there's all sorts of situations like that. So we're reliant on what is reported. And the question is, how much of this gets reported accurately or not? And obviously, and that's no criticism to the reporters, if you will. It's just difficult to parse the data sometimes, and the data's not fulsome. You know, if you got somebody that's drunk, really drunk, and they were looking at their phone, the phone's probably not going to make the report, right? It's probably going to be they were drunk, right? So is that drunk driving or distracted driving, or which one is it? It's both, but, you know, it's that kind of situation. So, yes, some of that's there, but it's not as good as you'd like it to be. Margie?
All right, the next few slides are focusing on our transit safety measures. And each transit agency is required to prepare, by federal requirements, a public transportation agency safety plan. DRPT assists some of the smaller transit agencies with development of that plan. That plan requires development of targets and their safety actions that they'll be taking to improve their performance as well. So this, while the transit agencies have been required to set targets and things like that, it's not something that we have regularly reported out on and the board has not taken action on. DRPT is now proposing a target that would combine all of those transit agencies into a single target. So this slide is addressing your fatalities, the next one is serious injuries, and the third one would be safety events. And again, these are federally required measures that are included in the PTASP, and DRPT is recommending that these would be the targets moving forward. Go through that in a little bit more detail unless you all, if you don't have any questions or want to move on.
Margie, we're going to be here till tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Okay, so again, this one is related to the injuries, and then the next one is related to the safety events. And you can see on the slide, there's a definition of what a safety event is. And these are tracked by each of the agencies and are submitted through the National Transit Database managed by FTA. So that wraps up our safety goal area. So we're transitioning now to the system preservation asset management. These first few slides are, again, highway related, but they're also very much linked to the VDOT Maintenance and Operations Comprehensive Review that was done back in 2019. And at that time, the board took action on targets for pavements and bridges and some other actions relative to special structures and other operations and maintenance activities. So you can see the data that's provided in here. You had a recent update. It's an annual update to the board. The Chief of Operations and Maintenance gave a presentation back in October on that most recent performance. And so that information is presented here, and you all were updated on that at that time. Right now you can also see that for pavements, what our measures are, but performance, and then the targets moving forward. Moving to bridges, we use a couple measures here. One is the average weighted general condition rating, so the GCR, and we have that target down there of that you all adopted back in 2019, and currently we are meeting those performance measures and targets. Any questions there? The next one is looking at our sufficiency rating of our bridges. So we're looking at non-poor, so they're good and fair. And again, very similar to what we're looking at with the GCR, but we look at it by each of the systems and monitor and track, and again, targets set a while ago and performing well there. This next one is a little bit different in that it's more of a qualitative approach to a measure, so that, again, annually, you all will be hearing an update on the 50-year special structures plan, and actually in December of 2024, you all took action on the long-range plan, the special structures plan. So this would just be making sure that you all are being informed of that annually, so more of a qualitative approach. obviously, there's a lot of data underneath it, but then qualitatively saying that, yep, we gave you all the information that's part of the policy.
But we do have a 50-year plan. We're implementing that plan. And the question would be, as we get that result, is it in accordance with the plan or not, right? If we were going to do X, Y, Z by year 15, did we do X, Y, Z by year 15? Or did we do it in year 13, or we're going to do it in year 20? Correct?
So using this qualitative approach, there's no target that's proposed. It'd just be more of a reporting element to you. Same thing here when we look at the routine maintenance best practices, and that is reported to you annually as well. So we're documenting and presenting to you of how we're progressing on addressing some of the routine maintenance and best practices. So no target proposed, but that will have received that report each year. So moving on to goal area C, transit side, apologies. We do have our transit side measures where we also consider asset management and state of good repair. As with the PTAS, transit agencies are required to develop a transit asset management plan. DRPT, again, assists with development of those plans with some of the smaller agencies around the Commonwealth. And within that, they are setting targets for managing their assets. This one is focusing on the revenue vehicles and making sure that they are remaining within their useful life. If not, that they would be replacing them. Questions there? We also, from a federal perspective, have the requirement where we look at the actual transit facilities, and they use a rating system, a transit economic requirements model scale or term, and that the facilities are assessed based on the scale. And the target here would be making sure that they are remaining in good condition as well. And so this is, again, the agencies have been setting these targets. We're now compiling it and presenting to you a proposed target for all of these agencies. Any questions?
I have a question.
Ms. Sellers?
So the transit stuff is interesting because it's not owned and maintained by the state. It's almost their contract. So this is perhaps setting something for the future, maybe more than an educational component, but to give us an idea of what the life of some of these are. And thinking back to my time on PRTC and VRE, where we would talk about the life cycle of rolling stock, and maybe the state didn't realize how old some of our systems were. So this might be very useful. I don't know if these are new measures for the first time, but for an opportunity for these transit agencies to speak to the state and say, this is the age. But this is very interesting, because I know coming from those, we didn't have that opportunity before, at least that I can remember.
We're doing that. This is what's happening now.
Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Director?
I just wanted to, Ms. Sellers, make sure you know that we now, I don't know exactly how long we've been doing this, but we collect the VIN numbers and mileage for all assets funded from all transit agencies twice per year. So we do keep track, and part of our scoring process for our merit program, which we were talking about in the subcommittee meeting this morning, is based on that useful life. We look at a lot of metrics around that, so we watch that very closely, which flows right into these VTrans metrics.
Very interesting, and maybe will help some of them compete a little bit better in Smart Scale, which has been some of their frustration, is they don't know how to compete in these programs. Maybe this will help them out. I don't know. These are just very interesting, and it caught my attention because they've never had, I don't remember us being able to really compete when I served on those boards, so it's very
Yes,
interesting.
and just, Mr. Secretary, Ms. Sellers, I backed up to one slide because there is a hyperlink there where it says ULB. DRPT has a dashboard where this is being tracked as well that's publicly available. So it is now out there. I don't think we have a long history with some of that data, and it's, improving as we go through. So I think this is, like you say, going to be very useful.
Right.
Okay, so We also look at the rail program and are looking at tracking the condition, state of good repair of the rail for our Class 2 and Class 3 railroads. And this is the track improvement. So on an annual basis, we would look at how much we are improving on the track miles. And we've set a proposed target of a 2% increase from a baseline, and that baseline is based on an average of those 4 years that are presented. So this is proposed moving forward. All right, now moving to goal area C, which is looking at trying to improve our travel time reliability and considering modal options. Again, focusing first on our highway measures. The first two presented here are federal measures that are looking at the percent miles that are reliable. The board takes actions on these federal measures. It's only done every 4 years versus safety, which is annually. We are midway through the performance period for those targets. But so the target was set back in 2022 by the board for our percent miles that are traveled that are reliable on the interstate. And then the next slide is the percent miles traveled that are reliable on the non-interstate NHS, National Highway System. So these are measures that we're tracking from a federal perspective and are useful for us for this purpose as well. We are also looking then from the transit side, looking at our bus and passenger rail on-time performance as a measure of reliability. There are it's kind of a combination of some state and federal requirements here. In Virginia, we're looking at the state-sponsored Amtrak, the VRE, and the Virginia Breeze. And these are the current performance that we have for them, as well as proposed targets for each of these organizations, these services. Reliability can also be measured based on the time between major failures. Then this is also utilized within the safety plans, safety action plans by each of the transit agencies. So that mean distance between failures for our revenue vehicles lets us know that things are operating well or not. And so what we're looking at is how much these are operating. And right now, the proposed target is we are proposing a target right now that is based off of a 3-year average of performance, and that target is listed there as far as what we would anticipate for fiscal year 24 as far as the most recent reporting year. Some data has lags. We also want to, as part of reliability, look at our freight throughput and freight movement. And so we use, again, another federal measure that is the Truck Travel Time Reliability Index. It was adopted by the board in 2022 as part of that federal target setting exercise. And right now it's based on the interstate system only, and it's looking at some of our worst travel times, the 95th percentile versus the average.
Mr. Secretary?
Yes, sir, Mr. Lawson.
I don't remember doing this. Have we met our goal, exceeded it, or are we for truck?
Yes, sir, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Lawson. We have to report out on it biennially. So we did do a report last summer that was due on October 1st, and we met all of our federal targets for the first 2 years of that performance period. Also part of the federal requirement with that target setting exercise, we have to submit the state freight plan and also identify freight bottlenecks, and that is done as part of the freight plan exercise. So we had identified 16 bottlenecks, and then we're monitoring how those things are performing through time. And again, that's part of our federal reporting submission. And so of the 16, our performance over the last 2 years, so that was 22 and 23, showed that 87% of the 16 locations were the same or were improved reliability. And then we have a target that we want to continue to improve our reliability on those at those locations specifically, up to 90%. The state freight plan will be updated in the not-too-distant future, and the bottleneck analysis will be redone so that, next performance period with FHWA and those requirements, we'll have a new set of bottlenecks that we'll be looking at. But we'll, in the meantime, monitor our progress towards the previously identified bottlenecks. On the freight side or the public transportation side, we want to look at our efficiency and effectiveness, and we can do that by looking at our passenger miles and passengers per revenue hour. So there's really three measures that we look at with this. We have our total passenger miles, the passengers per revenue hour, and then the passengers per revenue mile. Again, these are measures that I have been tracked, but we haven't necessarily been utilizing, especially looking at it collectively from a statewide perspective. So we're proposing targets there on item G as far as what we would want to see in 2025. And I believe this data is all reported as well on DRPT's dashboards. One thing that will help us in understanding reliability and minimizing congestion is looking at those modal options. So we want to understand, are we making transit accessible, trying to remove some cars off the road? So we've got two measures here. One is looking at the number of jobs accessible by transit. So this is a new measure for us. So we have a proposed target of, how many jobs in Virginia are accessible and then what our target would be. And so this is just looking at jobs that are within walking distance of a transit stop or station. And it uses methodology that's consistent with merit. The associated measure then looks at the number of people with access to transit. So this again is looking at people that can walk to a transit stop or station, what population can do that. Again, using merit as our methodology to identify that. Our proposed target. And you can see the existing performance and what is being proposed moving forward. Goal D is one that I guess presented some challenges to us. I think we can all agree that it's really important to have an integrated multimodal system, but identifying measures that really work well to tell us that has been a little bit of a challenge. So these next few measures are kind of one of the best ways we can think of for the time being, how we can start assessing that. And so if we're looking at some redundancy within the networks, one of our ways is looking at some of the projects that we're implementing through some of our programs. One of the big examples here is the IOEP corridor plans, which do look at alternative modes of travel along a corridor, not just limited to the highway portion of it. So the proposed target here, or measure, is to provide a list of projects that will be implemented and a schedule so that we can start seeing where we're hopefully going to be improving and providing that redundancy. More of a qualitative approach again. We also want to look at making sure that our transit system is working well, and so looking at an increase in ridership, especially when we're improving our bus stops, the condition and access to those. We don't have a lot of bus stop ridership level data, so currently what we're looking at is assessing how those facilities are, using that term rating system that I mentioned before, so it's telling us the quality of the facilities that are being provided. So this is kind of an emerging area of tracking data and information. So currently it's proposed that we would look at those facilities, improving their condition, accessibility, and with a pretty low target initially, because this is a new measure for us. And so this is something that the DRPT will be continuing to work on and track and obtain more data through time. Right, we want to enhance our rail movement. This helps support, one of the modes, integrating those modes. So we're looking at new carloads that are generated through DRPT's rail grant program. So we can track that on an annual basis. DRPT is proposing a target that would increase from a baseline condition that's averaged over the 2021 to 2023 period, trying to increase that by 2% per year. So you can see the current performance and then the proposed target for fiscal year '25. Next measure then is looking at our industrial access program and trying to increase the utilization of that. It is something that's the rail program, they present to you pretty regularly on use of the rail program, but we know on the highway side that we haven't seen as much activity in that, and so we want to encourage the use of it. So the goal here is making this more of a communication goal or measure, and then really kind of tracking how it is that we're engaging with the private sector or the public sector so that this increases utilization of this grant program. We also want to look at, so this is a component of that program I just referenced, the Rail Industrial Access Grant Program. That is one that you do see periodically come from DRPT with those applications, and from that we're able to determine what kind of new carloads are represented from each of those grant programs. And then the next one is the number of new jobs that are added as a function of those grant programs. So both of those can be tracked and presented on a regular basis. So these are new measures that we would propose. So the last goal area is environmental stewardship. This is one where we've gone to a little bit more of a qualitative approach again, and really documenting and demonstrating the environmental stewardship through completion of some of the required state and federal requirements. That was duplicative. So this first measure is looking at that we're doing and documenting compliance with those state and federal environmental review requirements and presenting information that shows the activities that have taken place with that, with the goal of 100% compliance. We always want to be in compliance with those laws and regulations. And then the last one is developing, and also we have compliance requirements with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And so again, this is more of a compliance-focused measure so that we're demonstrating that we are complying with the federal requirements. So it's proposed that we would be in 100% compliance of the air quality requirements as well. All right. So just next steps, we'd like to hear from you if there's any questions further that we can address. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, so we would update these as needed. Next month, the desire is to take action on the vision, goals, and objectives, and I believe the measures. So as far as the report card, our office is responsible for preparing a biennial report on surface transportation performance, and we would anticipate all of these measures being included in that report so that regular reporting is conducted. Any other questions?
Right, appreciate it very much. All right, the next item on the agenda is the directors. I think I'm going to get through the workshop agenda, and then we'll break for lunch after that. So, Ms. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. In the interest of time, talked in the last couple meetings about some preliminary ridership numbers from the end. Happy to say those numbers were all verified, so we have positive ridership numbers, all surpassing DRPT's goals. Oh, thank you, sir. I talk loud anyway, I probably didn't need it, but we are happy to say that all of our ridership numbers for calendar year 2024 did surpass our goal for Virginia agencies, and they surpassed pre-pandemic levels at the same time in 2019. I can also tell you that preliminary numbers for the capital region are showing positive improvements with WMATA and VRE as workers return to work. So more to come in the coming months there. I also just wanted to highlight that we have received nearly 370 applications in our rail and grant programs from our December to February grant round. Our team, as we talked a little bit about in the subcommittee meeting, those members heard how we're scoring and prioritizing those. We have a very short window to do that, and we're very busy making sure we have everything ready to propose to you next month in the draft SIP. And a little exciting news for Williamsburg. On April 3rd, they're going to have a groundbreaking for the Williamsburg Area Transit Authority, or WADA's Northern Transit Center. I hope some of you know about that. It's been a long time in the works, and this is going to give passengers a really nice, safe, and reliable facility to change buses just north of Williamsburg. And then last but not least, kind of switching my hat over to VPRA, I did want to mention that we are going to be having a ceremonial groundbreaking for the new River Valley Station on April 24th, and we'll be really excited to welcome Governor Youngkin to that event, and the Secretary and I will be there as well. So hope you can come. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Mr. Secretary, I have two items for the board, just informational purposes, and both of which were mentioned earlier this morning. As Kim indicated, that we'll be holding our spring meetings for the six-year improvement program. That'll start after the April board meeting and conclude before the May board meeting. So we've got a packed 3 or 4 weeks of touring the state to each of the 9 districts then. Carol will be sending out those scheduled events later this afternoon to be placed on your calendar if they aren't already communicated to you by your district engineers. And then secondarily, following up on the Secretary's comments as well on the budgetary impacts to Hurricane Helene and the winter events, we continue to work on those budget items, but I'm confident that we'll have a path forward to be able to present to the board in the April meeting in time for the six-year plan draft development for your information purposes at that time. So more to come at the April meeting on what we anticipate to occur out of that budget and the impacts of the emergencies that we've experienced throughout this fiscal year. Mr. Secretary.
Questions? All right, my report will be brief. I would tell you that we continue to work through the session. Obviously, bill signing, bill review, and budget work, which is something will come back on April 2nd. April 2nd. I would tell you that I think the process, we're just working. Good news in the Commonwealth is that we remain really strong economically. Some of our lots of opportunity here, continue to have good economic development. Today. So we need to remain vigilant and continue. Shift out of General Assembly mode into regular mode and come in April. And then we got a lot of work to do the rest of the year. But I'm looking forward to that. Lots of great opportunities, I said, and I think coming. Questions for me? If you do, all you're going to be doing is delaying your lunch. I'm going to adjourn the workshop meeting, and we'll go to lunch, and we'll come back and start the action meeting. Thank you. About 40 minutes or so. Calling to order the meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board for our action meeting. Appreciate everybody being here. Thank you for the staff for providing us some lunch. It was very nice. The first item on our agenda is the public comment. There is no one that has signed up for public comment. So unless somebody would like to sign it right now, then we're going to bypass that opportunity. All right, hearing none. We'll go to the approval of the minutes. The minutes were distributed in your package. Are there any comments or corrections?
Move approval.
Ms. Sellers moves. Is there a second? Mr. Coleman, Mr. Folks seconded. So I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Item number 1 under location and design, action location approval for Red Bud Road, Route 661 relocation in Frederick County within the Stanton District. Mr. Heltzel.
Good
Welcome,
afternoon,
and good afternoon.
Mr. Secretary, members of the board. The Secretary has has enumerated the project. I'll just add that it's being developed in preparation for future interchange modifications on Interstate 81 at exit 317 in Frederick County, hence the purpose for this relocation. We have held a location and design public hearing for the project and received endorsement from the Frederick County Administrator. There are no federal funds on this project, so the environmental reviews and considerations have been undertaken by the department. And with favorable dispensation, Mr. Secretary, we'll move on to the next phases of the project, and we intend to advertise it for construction at the end of this year.
Any comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve? You own part of the property the road's going through. Mr. Good will abstain from the discussion and the vote.
I'll move.
Mr. Lawson makes a motion. Mr. Laird seconds. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Mr. Good, are you abstaining? Yes. Mr. Good abstains. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The next item on the agenda is under the Infrastructure Investment Division. Action on revised FY 25 through 36-year improvement program transfers for January 11th through February 14th. Ms. Pryor.
Thank you, Mr.
Welcome back.
Secretary. Thank you, members of the board. The monthly transfer report is before you. It includes projects that have had transfers for your information below the threshold, as well as those that require your action, and I recommend your approval.
Ms. Casperits moves, Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Item number 3, action on smart scale project cancellation, Columbia Pike Smart Corridor Project, UPC 111656, located within the Northern Virginia District. Ms. Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Members of the board, you'll recall that I briefed you all on this proposed cancellation last month. Components of the project were completed through other means by the county, and the commuter store portion of the project is being reevaluated for its appropriateness by the county. So I recommend your approval of the cancellation.
Mr. Casperits moves. Is there a second? Ms. Green seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Action, item number 4, action on smart scale project cancellation, Roslyn Ballston Corridor Multimodal Connections Project, UPC 111662, located within the Northern Virginia District.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Members of the board, you'll recall I briefed you on this proposed cancellation last month as well. Similar to the previous one, the county was able to complete most of the components of this project as part of other projects in the region, and the transit service previously proposed as part of this is being provided by WMATA currently. And I recommend your approval.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Casperits moves. Is there a second? Ms. Green seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is item number 5 under the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Action on rail industrial access to DeLong Company, Inc. in the city of Portsmouth located within the Hampton Roads District. Mr. Todd.
Yeah,
Welcome,
Mr.
sir. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Thank you for having me. The DeLong Company has applied for $750,000 from the Rail Industrial Access Program, supporting a $27 million investment in the city of Portsmouth. The project scores well using the scoring criteria, including 3,000 new carloads and 12 new jobs, and therefore I recommend your approval.
Mr. Coleman moves. Is there a second? Second. Mr. Folks seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Todd.
Thank you.
Mr. Tucker, Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, item number 6. Action to approve the location selected for studying the project pipeline program. Welcome, Mr. Tucker. Welcome back.
Mr. Secretary, it's a pleasure to be here, members of the board. Back in December, I presented you with an overview of the project pipeline study program. Then in December and January, met with each of you individually. We made some adjustments based on the feedback we got during those meetings, and I respectfully request approval of the study list so that we can move forward with the next round of studies.
Ms. Sellers makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Smoot seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Well done, Mr. Tucker.
Thank you.
Item number 7 under scheduling and contract, Mr. Coker. How we doing, Mr. Coker?
Pretty good, Mr. Secretary. How are you?
Great, welcome. Nice to see you.
Good to be here. Mr. Secretary, members of the board, I have one project today to present to you in excess of $5 million for your consideration. This is a design-build project in the Richmond and Lynchburg districts. It is a bridge bundle district. We have bundled 4 bridges together in multiple counties. We received 3 bids. The low bid from English Construction Company was $57.8 million. It is within range, and I recommend approval.
Secretary, I move approval.
Mr. Davis moves. Is there a second? Ms. Green seconds. Is there further discussion? Mr. Coker, you mentioned that you bundled these together. Can you give us a little bit of, just a little bit of flavor, to pat yourself on the back for this a little bit?
Yes, sir. So we have, this is, I believe, the 3rd bridge bundle project we've done. We did one in Salem, I think another one in Bristol, a couple other districts. But we're trying to gain economies of scale by bundling multiple projects together that otherwise would just be smaller projects to increase competition and try and get a better deal for the taxpayers.
You feel that this is helping you? Yes. Great. Comments or questions? We have a motion? Yes. Scream a second. All right. Here we go. Thanks, Carol. Keep me straight. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Coker.
Thank you, sir.
Well done. That is, concludes our agenda. Is there any new business? Before we conclude, just let me wish you a safe trip home. Thank you for your work. We got lots of work to do during the summer. We will take off August. Take off August, but otherwise we will be rolling. We've got our 6-year plan meetings across the districts coming up in April. And so we'll be back on the road coming to see everybody. Appreciate all your hard work, and please be safe on the highways. This meeting's adjourned.